What to do about preserving Social Security so it's available for future generations is a gigantic political football that's been kicked around for years and years. Even now, the two primary presidential candidates, Trump and Biden, both promise not to make changes that would adversely affect beneficiaries. But the fact remains that unless some kind of action is taken, the trust fund will run out of money in just a few years. Now, it's a political hot potato that most politicians, Republicans and Democrats alike, are loath to tackle. And for folks not yet at retirement age, whatever happens will be a big damn deal with serious political repercussions. That's our topic today, and we have with us one of the nation's top experts on the matter, James B. Lockhart III, the former Principal Deputy Commissioner and Chief Operating Officer of the Social Security Administration. So stay with us.
Welcome to Lean to the Left, home of no-holds-barred commentary, plus interviews with fascinating people, some of them top experts, others simply with interesting stories to tell. You'll never know who'll show up at Lean to the Left. Now here's your host, Bob Gaddy.
Mr. Lockhart was a member of President Bush's Management Council, and he's the author of the award-winning book, America Underwater and Sinking. He currently is a senior fellow of the Bipartisan Policy Center, and he's had a long and distinguished career also serving as the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, regulator of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Federal Home Loan Banks, and his predecessor agency, the Office of Federal Housing Enterprise Oversight. Mr. Lockhart, thanks so much for joining us on our podcast today.
Well, thank you, Bob, for having me. It's a very timely topic, and I'm really pleased to talk about Social Security and government overall.
I thank you. It is a very timely topic and one that's incredibly important if only the politicians can find enough courage to take some kind of meaningful, responsible action. The campaign's heating up, and in addition to the presidency, control of both houses of Congress is at stake. Candidates are dancing around this issue as usual. But why is that, Mr. Lockhart? Why is it that Social Security reform has been pretty much ignored and really still is?
There's a lot of reasons, but you go back to the beginning. Social Security is by far the biggest program in the United States government, much bigger than the Defense Department. Pay out $1.3 trillion a year to 66 million Americans, and 180 some million pay into it. So the breadbasket of America in a way, and it's so important to people's retirement. That's why it is an issue that Congress should be worried about. On the other hand, it is a hot potato, or as the phrase goes in Washington, it's the third rail, which is the electric rail in a subway. Touch it, and as President Bush said in his book, you're toast. And President Clinton tried as well. And those were the last two presidents even had the guts to try something.
Yeah.
Since then, both our presidents today, both the previous president and the president today, Biden and Trump, have both said that they're going to protect Social Security, which means doing nothing as far as I can figure, because in 9 short years, there'll be a 25% cutback.
What?
And that's not protecting Social Security if you're doing that.
Wait. Come back to that. A 25% cutback if they don't do anything?
Yeah.
Is that automatic? Is that automatic? Well, it's going to take effect?
It's automatic unless Congress does something. And either Congress can reform the program, or at that point, it would take $500 billion a year to make up for the difference of promised benefits. What happens is there's a trust fund. Yeah. And the trust fund was built up over the years. In the 83 reforms, the Greenspan reforms, and they changed the retirement age and did some other things very slowly, but they changed it over 30 some years. Right. And that trust fund is starting to be eaten into today because effectively the government borrowed the money from Social Security. And so now the government's paying back all of those bonds. And in 9 years, the bonds will disappear. The trust fund will disappear. And there'll be a hole of $500 billion a year and growing every year thereafter. And the only way to cover that hole is reforms, or Congress has to pass a law that says, oh, yeah, we're going to spend another $500 billion a year. Where they're going to get that $500 billion given the deficits and the debt outstanding is a very big question.
Wow.
But to go back to your question, why they don't touch it,
Yeah.
is the third rail. And one of the reasons it's the third rail is because the elderly vote. And the younger generation, unfortunately, doesn't vote as much. And they've written off Social Security in their mind, which, of course, is wrong because when they get to retirement ages, it will be a big part of the retirement if it's still there. Yeah. So that is the problem. When Bush was doing reforms, President Bush, he said, not going to touch anybody over 55. Mm-hmm. Going to keep your benefits the same. No increase in retirement age, nothing. Mm-hmm. And yet, the elderly were against it. ARP came out big time against it.
Mm-hmm. So what's the future? What do you think is going to happen?
Congress, in my experience, and I worked for 4 different agencies. One you didn't mention was the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, okay. Which was for George H.W. Bush.
Yeah, you have a long resume, and I had to cut some of it.
That's okay. I know it took many legislative fixes to get it, and I always write it was on the brink. In the American Recovery Act, the thing that was passed a couple of years ago, they actually bailed out the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation's multi-employer union plans for $80-some billion. And that's how Congress acts. Until you get to the crisis, they don't act. The same with Fannie and Freddie. Until we got to the crisis, we had no legislation to fix them. Yeah. And that's part of the problem we face today. So what is the future of Social Security? We'll either have those cuts I mentioned, or we'll have some reform. Now, there is actually some proposals in Congress. The House Budget Committee, Senator Manchin and Romney, and the Senate have all, and many others. I think ex-Senator Rob Portman just had an op-ed on this, is to create a commission, a fiscal commission, to look at the big entitlement programs. And when you look at a problem going forward, it's really the big entitlement programs. I guess you could say in the next 10 years, CBO says that 84% of government increase in spending will be in programs that Congress really doesn't control. And interest is going to grow dramatically, and Social Security is by far the biggest of that.
What reforms would be possible that would not harm people who rely on Social Security?
Okay, we'll be harmed if we don't do reforms. That's the base.
That's true. That's true. 25%.
I've heard a number that the average couple will have $17,000, $18,000 a year less benefits. So it's a pretty big hunk of many people's retirement. And so that's no reforms. So how do we do reforms? I actually co-chaired with the Bipartisan Policy Center with former Senator Conrad a commission on retirement security. Mm-hmm. And we had 16 members, about half Democrats, half Republicans, senior politicians, the last 2 trustees of Social Security and Medicare. They haven't actually had trustees in the last 8 years. Just to show you how afraid Congress, and they don't even appoint trustees.
It's a wonderful system we have, isn't it?
It really is. And so our commission came through with a whole series of proposals on retirement security, and some of them have happened, Secure Act 1 and Secure Act 2, looking at 401ks and some other issues. But our big reforms was Social Security. Yeah. And we had, I think, 11 different proposals. And what we did, unlike what the Republicans and Democrats talk about, the Republicans talk about benefit reductions.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats talk about tax increases.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did is we cut the baby and said 50-50 each. So
Okay.
you slow down the growth of benefits, and you do that by very slowly increasing the retirement age, by making benefits more progressive. And
What do you mean by that?
upper income people get less percentage than lower income people, basically.
Okay. Okay.
It already works that way, but even make skewing it more that way.
Okay.
And,
Fine.
and then the other thing was the cost of living increase. Remember, last year was 8% yet inflation wasn't there. And so
Yeah.
looking at a better cost of living increase. But the key thing we did on benefits was, yes, we slowed down the growth of benefits, especially for the upper income.
Mm-hmm.
But we increase benefits for the lower income, and you can do that, and that's very important. And then, so if you go to the tax side, the taxable maximum, has to be increased, and that's like 160,000 now, and it should be increased. President Biden says we're not going to touch anybody's taxes unless they earn 400,000 a year, which we have to increase the tax maximum, including those people less than 400,000 a year.
Okay.
Less than 2% of the people in this country earn 400,000 a year. So you can't get all the money from that tax. We have to even look at FICA, the payroll tax, and slowly increase that. I think our proposal was a 1% increase over a 10-year period, half from employers, half from workers. So it probably wouldn't even be noticed. That's a tenth of a percent a year for a worker, much less than inflation. And you do that, and there's a tax for higher income people and their Social Security benefits.
Mm-hmm.
You increase that tax too. And you put all these things together, and you come up with a proposal that actually, in our case, fixes Social Security forever.
Okay.
Yes, the benefits are slower than our promised benefits, but much higher than what will happen if we don't do anything and cut benefits 25%.
I can tell you this, that if I was running a campaign for somebody running for Congress, and we brought you in to give us advice as to how to fix Social Security, I think my boss would probably kick you out of the room for talking about raising all those taxes. And
Yeah, I know. I agree that. And that's why they don't want to touch it. And that's why I think the only way to do it is this fiscal commission, creating a commission.
Right.
It's as senators and congressmen, Republicans, Democrats, experts on finances and Social Security, and getting them into a room for probably 2 years and working out a series of proposals. And then I don't remember if you remember, maybe you do, because back in your days when you're in Congress, they had something called the Base Closing Commission.
Okay. Yes, I do remember that.
And no one wanted their local army base to be closed or, or whatever.
Right.
And so it's through a whole set of proposals. They had this commission, bipartisan, and they came up with which bases should be closed. Mm-hmm. And they had an up and down vote.
Right.
And that's almost what you have to do with Social Security. President Bush had a commission, came bipartisan, came up with a lot of good proposals, but you could never get the sign on. And so you need the sign on from Congress with the proposal to begin with. And maybe your boss as a congressman wouldn't go along with the individual proposals, but when it's all there together and it's a nice balanced set of proposals and it prevents those 25% cuts, maybe they would vote for it.
It would take some degree of a sense of responsibility and political courage to do that now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. And that's one of the things, unfortunately, that is lacking in Washington at the moment. I think, as I said, the last major commission was in 1983, called the Greenspan Commission, and it had Reagan and Tip O'Neill, and they did a deal. And that's what you need.
But we don't have Reagan and Tip O'Neill around anymore. It's too bad.
We do not. You're right.
We need people like that in Congress, and we just don't have them. I was watching last night the State of the Union, and Biden did a pretty good job, I thought. But the new Speaker of the House just sat there shaking his head, except for when it was something that it was, politically positive, and then he didn't. He actually stood up one time. I think it was in honor of somebody. I don't remember what it was, but he just sat there and shook his head. And
Yeah, no, Washington is dysfunctional now. It was,
Yeah.
in my day, to get those reforms of PBGC, certainly the Fannie and Freddie reforms that we finally got 40 days before we put them in a conservatorship, never got Social Security reforms. It is a problem.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, I think this commission idea may be the only way to get our way. Or the other thing is you wait until 9 years and then Congress has to do something.
Isn't that how they usually do it?
Yeah, that's how they usually do it. But
Yeah.
when you look at it today, I said that the Social Security benefits are $1.3 trillion.
Yeah.
In 10 years, they'll be $2.5 trillion.
Oh my.
And to pay those, we'll have to get half a trillion from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And every year it'll be that half a trillion plus. And so we have a problem. We have everybody loves to spend money in Washington these days. Yeah. Even the so-called fiscally conservative Republicans. They like to decrease taxes. And you heard last night in the State of the Union, the president had a lot of proposals. I think he had a tax proposal there to tax the billionaires. And he said that was going to raise $500 billion over 10 years. Mm-hmm. Guess what? The hole in Social Security in 1 year is $500 billion. And so you see, taxing the rich is not the only answer here. You got to actually make some tough decisions. That's why we hired them in Congress and the president.
Would you think either one of these two guys, Trump or Biden, can be trusted to do anything about Social Security that will actually work?
When you think about it, they're only going to be there for 4 years.
That's true.
Either one of them.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's be 5 years away when they leave office.
So you're hoping that somebody with more political guts and that the atmosphere will be less divisive after they leave, right?
It's hard to see something happen unless this fiscal commission happens. Right. Beyond that, both of them have very clearly said they're going to protect Social Security, which means they're going to do nothing.
Yeah, they seem to be fighting over who can be tougher on.
Yeah, no, I shouldn't say this because my wife doesn't like me to say it, but I was actually nominated twice by President Trump to be one of the two public trustees of Secretary. I was the Republican, there was a Democrat. Congress, as I mentioned before, didn't even vote on it. And Trump didn't push it. His team didn't push it. And certain Biden he's actually nominated people, but nothing's happened. But that's just part of the problem because the trustees put out a report every year of the 75-year forecast of Social Security. Mm-hmm. And that should be a blazing document on the Hill that everybody looks at these giant deficits.
Yeah.
Trillions are so easy to say these days, but I'll give you another $1 trillion number. When President Bush was trying to fix Social Security, if we had put in $4 trillion at that point, a little less than $4 trillion, Social Security would have been fixed.
Right.
Today, that number is $22 trillion for 75 years. It's mind-boggling.
It is incredible. It really is. What do you think the chances are that a commission like this can be established? And is there anybody now leading the effort on the Hill to do that?
I guess the House Budget Committee, Congressman Arrington, I think his name is, has a proposal put forward for the House. And they actually had a bipartisan vote in favor of that. But obviously, it was a full House, and whether anything like there, not sure. The two big sponsors in the Senate, Romney and Manchin, are leaving, unfortunately. Right. We're unfortunately losing our centrists. But there is Senator Conrad, Senator Portman, both ex-senators have testified on the Hill in favor of this commission. Mm-hmm. And so there could be some momentum. It's an easy way to kick the can down the road, but it's at least there's a can. At the moment, there's not even a can.
You do need a can if you're going to kick it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Is the problem with the Social Security Trust Fund, does it stem from government inefficiencies?
There's definitely some government inefficiencies in Social Security.
Yeah.
Systems are very old. We have like 100,000 people working in Social Security. They're very dedicated workers. I probably went to 100 different offices of the 1,000 they have in the country. And they're really very dedicated people, but actually they're the baby boomer generation and they're retiring and people aren't coming in. So we need better systems to replace them. So we need much better management of Social Security. We had a manager in there that actually President Trump put in, and Biden fired, even though he had no cause to fire him. And then in an interim that had no management experience. So we need better management, but we need the money to management. Congress does not give Social Security the money to manage the place the way it should. We haven't talked about disability benefits in Social Security. It really made me talk about retirement. Yeah. But that program is a mess. And it takes 2, 3, 4 years to get your benefits. And once you're on, people won't leave and recover. Yeah. And Congress won't give money to help do studies to help people see if people recovered. There's some fraud in Social Security. There's fraud in a lot of different programs. But it's, again, better management, better systems would help a lot.
Okay. What lessons have you learned from managing these 4 major government agencies and working for 3 presidents and dealing with a global finance crisis?
There's lots of lessons I have in my book. And one of them is simply Congress needs to be more proactive. Okay. The problem is we have so many different programs that most of the typical congressman or senator knows only a few. Right. Well, I start out my book with a quote from Ben Bernanke, Fed chairman. And he says, and many people also said this, including Paul Krugman at the New York Times, that the U.S. government is an insurance company with an army. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it, we have 150 different insurance programs in the U.S. government.
Wow.
And so many of them are mismanaged. Very few of them are based on sound insurance principles. The accounting is wrong. And so no one ever really understands the tremendous liabilities. And that's just the insurance programs. Obviously, there's all the big departments, many of the other ones that are inefficient. And part of the problem is that we have a system with a lot of political appointees. And in the big departments, they go down 4 or 5 layers. And oftentimes the political appointees there because they gave money, or they have some political collection, they worked on the campaign, right. And they don't necessarily have the management experience. And so then you have the senior career people doing the day-to-day management, and some of them are very good, as I mentioned, but they need leadership. And too often the political leadership is more interested in the politics, being on television, being in the newspaper, doing podcasts, whatever it is.
All right, I get that. So it's
a management problem, but it's also being more proactive. Congress has to look at programs on a periodic basis. I think every year President Bush had 100 programs that should have been sunsetted, never worked. They always have a favorite child. One of my favorite stories about Social Security is we had an office, a one-person office in a city in either South or North Dakota. That person retired. Okay. And so we were going to close the office. And the local congressmen and senators said, no way. Okay. So that's just it. Everybody has their little area they want to protect.
Oh, yeah.
And instead, they're not protecting the American people.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you were talking about base closures when I worked on Capitol Hill back in the late 70s. And I did it for 2 different congressmen. And both of them, though, represented the area where Fort Dix is.
Okay.
And my job, one of my main jobs, was to develop a strategy to prevent them from closing Fort Dix. And I was doing that for the first guy, Ed Forsyth, and then I had to do it for the second guy, Jim Florio. And we were successful until, I don't know, I think they did finally end up closing Fort Dix. Did they not? Do you know?
I'm not sure that they have. I can't remember. I thought that's
I can't either.
It survived. It definitely survived the base closing commission.
Yeah, it did do that. And I have a soft spot in my heart for Fort Dix because my dad was stationed there. He was a chaplain. And I went to high school at a little town near Fort Dix. And I married somebody who was, my first wife was from that area. And I have a soft spot in my heart for Fort Dix. hate to see it close. I don't know if it ever did, but it was quite a job and had to arrange a meeting at the White House with President Carter and did that. And Carter just sat there. He never said anything really. Uh,
That was my experience with Obama too. Actually, Bush actually would get into the conversation because he had a joking sense of humor. So he
oh
would
yeah.
call me by my nickname and everything. But anyway,
What? What? Your nickname? What?
how I got into government was I had gone to school and college, Bush W.
Oh, you went to school with W.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah.
actually school too. We were old friends, and I had a nickname in high school of Juice. And so
Juice. Why juice?
so
Tell me.
middle of a big meeting with all these cabinet secretaries to say yes, juice the question, and everyone just sort of
Why did they
broke
call
out.
you? Why did they call you Juice?
I never told that, but actually, my grandchildren now call me Juice, so no dignity there. But I understand. Actually, I had some military background, hence partially the title of my book, American Underwater,
Uh,
is that my first job out of college was in the U.S. Navy as an officer on a nuclear submarine.
okay.
And the next part of the title of the book is, it's America Underwater and Sinking, Let's Surface. And obviously, my submarine surfaced every time.
That's a good thing.
I'm just hoping somehow the U.S. can figure out how to surface. But as you say, it's really tough in Congress and Washington at the moment because they're pulling apart. We have the left wing and the right wing, and the centralists are not pulling us together anymore.
Yeah, I wanted to get you to talk a little bit more about why you think America is underwater and sinking.
It's the most obvious thing is our annual deficit is approaching $2 trillion a year.
Yeah.
Our total debt of the United States is now $34 trillion. In the next, according to the Congressional Budget Office, in the next 10 years, that's going to go up by another 21 to like $55 trillion. Interest is going to be the second biggest expense next to Social Security as we have to borrow all this money going forward. So we are underwater and sinking, and we have to figure out a way to fix it. And that's fixing Social Security, fixing Medicare, and looking at the other entitlement programs. And yes, we'll have to do something on the tax side. Yes, we'll have to do something on the benefit side. But these are the tough decisions that have to be made, or we're going to give to our children and grandchildren a sea of red ink. That's why we're underwater. We talked a little bit about some of the management issues in the U.S. and the lack of really a mission, a strategic plan for the U.S. Everybody just looks day to day, and they don't think about the long term and where we want to be and how we should be.
Right.
But even in the State of the Union last night, there was a President Biden mentioned a whole series of new programs. We keep creating new programs, but don't fix the old programs.
Yeah, that occurred to me while he was talking about that. How are we going to do all these new programs when we can't afford the ones we already have?
Exactly. And it is a problem. Some of them are good and if they're targeted properly.
Yeah.
What happens too often is Congress creates a program and it gets out of control one way or another. They initially don't set the rules properly. Yeah. Sometimes they constrain the agency that's administering the program so they can't change the rules to make it more efficient. Mm-hmm. And you end up with just ballooning deficits. Take the student loan thing. When it was brought back into the government, it was promised to be a money maker for the government, and yet we keep writing student loans off. And Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation having to bail out the union plans. Obviously, Fannie and Freddie had to be bailed out. The government put in $190 trillion into Fannie and Freddie. Now they got back over 300 trillion, so that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But we shouldn't have gotten to those places. But we keep getting there because Congress is unwilling to make the tough decisions.
Do you see that changing anytime soon?
I wish I did.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, one of our problems is some of the centralists are leaving, the ones that could try to pull things together and make those decisions. Yeah. You look at the latest Senate bill on Ukraine and the border, and you would thought that would have been a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a bipartisan deal they finally came up with and passed the House. And then what happened in the Senate?
Vice versa. Yeah. Passed the Senate. What happened? House. Yeah.
Yeah. And
That's
and Trump just said no.
yeah, yeah,
And
and
so the Republicans go, oh, okay.
yeah, no, it's a problem that he seems to be controlling the Republican Party at the moment.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm a Republican,
Yeah.
like working for both of the Bushes, and
I won't hold that against you.
it's tough being a Republican these days. There's no doubt about it. But Northeast Republican, if you will, a little socially liberal and fiscally conservative.
There you go.
And it's tough. It
Yeah.
really is tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Where can people find your book?
You can find it on Amazon. It's right there. Be happy to have people buy it and want me to send a little thing of my signature on it. They just send me a note. I have a website, jblockhart.com.
Okay.
A lot of information on the website. It has my bio. It has, a lot of the media events I did. I'll post yours on it.
Okay.
And the awards the book's won. And the book itself is a book about my government experience. But as I said earlier, it's a case study of how you need to do things better in the government. And it has a lot of recommendations on how to better run those 150 insurance companies. A lot of recommendations how to do Social Security, pensions, Medicare, and just government overall, how to make it more efficient, how we should have plans, strategic plans, how government agencies should be required to look out in their future and say what could go wrong and present that to Congress on a regular basis. So Congress can't ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other problem we have is Congress is too much beholden on to the lobbyists. The first thing I did when I became the conservative of Fannie and Freddie is I fired all the lobbyists. And there was and there was like 100. Some of them were my friends.
Wait a minute. Lobbyists within the agency?
No, lobbyists that they were paying. Are they all?
That they were paying.
No, in Fannie and Freddie. Fannie were paying lobbyists. And what they were paying the lobbyists mainly for is to not have any reforms. And so what happened, of course, is they went belly up with reform. Fannie and Freddie have a very important mission. A little sidetrack, but about 70% of the mortgages in this country are backed by the government one way or another. So we have a very socialistic system. Fannie and Freddie back $6 trillion in mortgages.
Wow.
And the problem is that there was no way for the regulator to regulate them. They had capital that was less than 1%. Banks today have 10% capital. And so when things go on, they really went wrong. That's Congress gave the agency the ability to change the capital rules 40 days before we put them in conservatorship, and it would take 2 or 3 years to change capital rules. So
okay. All right. Do you have anything uplifting to say before we close this up?
I'm an optimist, actually, and I think
you can tell.
That's why I say let's surface, and it really is going out and engaging the political class to make them understand that we have some of these big problems: the deficit, the debt, and the entitlement programs. We need to reform them, and it's too easy to demagogue them. It's too easy to avoid the third rail. But we need to figure out how to do it, and I'm afraid that the only way we can is by a commission, as I mentioned. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts about running for office yourself?
No. I'm at the age that
spring chicken, man.
Clinton and President Trump, all of which should not be running for president at the moment.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today. I really do appreciate it. This is obviously an incredibly important topic. And to have somebody with the expertise and background that you have is a real thrill for me. And I really do appreciate you coming on, Mr.
Thank you, Bob. I really appreciate it being on. Great questions and great dialogue.
Hey, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Lean to the Left video and that you found it interesting and informative. Please visit on a regular basis and check out our interviews with guests on topics that focus on progressive politics and the important social issues of our time. Now, our interview shows stream on Mondays with special episodes on Thursdays. And you can check out upcoming shows, guests, and topics at podcast.leantotheleft.net. Subscribe to our audio version there and to our video shows here at YouTube. And follow us on social media. Facebook at Bob Gaddy and the Lean to the Left podcast. Now, it's two. Bob Gaddy is one Facebook page, and the Lean to the Left podcast is a second Facebook page. Twitter at Lean to the Left 1. Instagram at Lean to the Left 1. TikTok at Lean to the Left. LinkedIn at Bob Gaddy. And YouTube at Lean to the Left. Now, I hope you'll support Lean to the Left as well so we can keep things going. Just click on the Donate tab at the top of the leantotheleft.net homepage and contribute by buying me a cup of coffee. That will really help and would be much, much, much appreciated. Now, this is Bob Gaddy signing off for Lean to the Left. Thanks for sharing your time with us.